Hello, and welcome back to the Agati Video Podcast. This is a space where we host conversations with different designers, architects, and industry thought leaders to help educate you in your work. My name is Joe Agati, and I'm the COO and Director of Design here at Agati Furniture. For today's episode of the podcast, I have the opportunity to talk with Jill Seitz, Senior Interior Designer at Moody Nolan, the largest African-American-owned design firm in the country, with more than 330 employees and 12 offices located across the U.S. Jill has been there for over 30 years and has a wide variety of experience and insights to bring to our conversation today. Jill, welcome. It's an honor to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Joe. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, this is great. So usually we just like to start off getting to know you and your background a little bit. How did you get into the profession?
How far back do you want me to go?
As far as you want.
I can say, I've been here 30 years. So I started when I was like 10. I'm kidding. But in reality, though, I think my interest in design started about that age, around 10 or 12, something like that. And I would just spend my summers like drawing floor plans in a notebook. I mean, it was the weirdest thing, but I would just do it. And my parents recognized that. My dad was a high school guidance counselor, so he found a program at Notre Dame University for rising high school seniors in their architecture department. He said, why don't you go explore this, see what you think? Yeah. So, because at the time I thought, well, I like to do this. I think maybe I might want to be an architect. So I did that. It was very eye-opening. It was 2 weeks in South Bend. I loved the program. It was really great. But I came home and said, I don't think that's what I want to do. It's not what I thought it was, or what I envisioned it to be. And plus, it's a lot of math, and math and me are not good friends. So I said, well, I got to think about this. So, never really came up with an idea of what I wanted to do. So I went to college. I went to Miami University as a business major. Okay. I'm my right brain is totally dominant. Business is not my thing. So I got through my freshman year and I said, no, I got to do something different. And I didn't know it was really a thing, but I found out there's a major for interior design. I went, oh, I think that sounds really, really cool. So I switched my major and I've never looked back. I loved it. Just jumped right in. It fit all the things that I needed to feel like I was doing the things that fed my creativity and I had a lot of fun with it. So that's how I got to decide I wanted to be an interior designer. Getting to Moody Nolan was an interesting story. I graduated from Miami at the end in December of 1990. So it was right at the beginning. I mean, the kind of world was in a little bit of turmoil. We were starting the Persian Gulf War. Not a lot of hiring happening in the architecture and design field. And luckily I had met Eileen Goodman, who is our director of design and one of our partners, because she went to Miami and had come back to visit her old employer. She'd actually held the same job I was doing while I was at school. I got to meet her just because she came to talk with the interior designer in the facilities department. And so I kind of just kept that in the back of my mind while they were not hiring. She had actually just started the department at Moody Nolan at that time. And so she was the designer. But then, fast forward a few months, my boyfriend, who is now my husband, he graduates from college and gets a job in Columbus, Ohio. So I started to hatch my little diabolical plan. I'm like, I'm moving to Columbus. I was living with my parents in Cincinnati. So I reached out to Eileen and I pretty much just stalked her for a few months. And finally, she was ready to grow the department. And I interviewed and I got the job. And that was in 1992. And I have been there ever since.
Very interesting.
It's a great start. It was wonderful to be on the kind of the inception of our interiors, studio. I've gotten to see a lot of people come into the company, and it's just been great to be part of all of that.
So now when you started, was there like a dominant market you were working in or the firm was focusing on at the time?
I feel like when I started, a lot of designers, when they get out of school, they're not given a lot of projects to do it first. You're
Hmm.
just getting your feet wet. You're learning how things work,
Sure.
managing the materials library or this and that,
Hmm.
until you get a little bit more experience under you. Because it was just the two of us, Eileen was out there bringing in the work and I was churning it out. So
Okay.
I got to work on all kinds of different project
Oh, okay.
types, which was such great experience. You know, I mean, I would say I did anything from a correctional facility for teenage girls
Oh, wow.
to worked on an historic renovation of a theater in Columbus, Ohio, office spaces, all of the project types that we had. I got a little piece of it. So I can't say that and I've never really focused on any one project type.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. What would you say is I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. What would you say is your favorite project kind of segment or market that you like to work
Oh,
in?
yeah. I could definitely tell you what is not my favorite, but I'm not going to go there. I I love workplace design. I don't get to do a
Okay.
lot of it, but I do
Yeah.
love it. But I do so much in the K-12 and higher ed
Yeah.
space that I really enjoy those projects because they 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 engage so many different people in the
Mm.
development of those projects.
Yeah.
And I love relationships. I like to
Hmm.
develop relationships with my clients, and it makes me want to give them something that they're so
Yeah.
they've been part of the design, but they also get to now live with this for they get to go on. I move on to another one, but they get to go on with what
Yeah.
we've developed. So I think that's why I like working with the K-12 and higher
Hmm.
ed, because you're working with young people and
Okay.
really forming spaces for them to really develop and become who they're going to be.
Yeah. So I mean, so you alluded there a little bit that you're working with when you work on those type of projects, you're working with a lot of different people. How do you? I'm assuming they're mostly like, you know, um, kind of not community based, but it's I guess there's an element of that. I guess where I'm going with it is you're working with like a group of people or a committee of people, correct? Usually on
Yeah.
those projects. How do
Hmm.
you navigate that? Because that can always be challenging with people.
It can. I think what it takes is establishing at the beginning
Mm.
who are the I don't want to call them decision makers because everybody has a voice, but
Hmm.
there has to be somebody who has the final say in
Yeah.
things. So you establish that kind of overarching group of people, or not. We
Hmm.
don't establish it, but we work with the clients to
Yeah.
establish that, and then we give all the other subgroups who are going to be
Hmm.
part of this process their voice and what they're able to,
Hmm.
because really you want the input from the users.
Yeah.
It's so much because that's who you're doing this for. But yet
Hmm.
you have to be aware and respectful of those that
Hmm.
are paying the bills
Yeah.
and funding this and also getting their input from maybe outside community or outside influences too on what they envision for this project. So you just have to have clear lines. I mean, I've had projects where there were 25 people
Mm.
on the committee and you just don't
Hmm.
get anything done with that. I mean, meaning they all had an equal voice
Yeah.
in that conversation. So it's very difficult to really get down to what the final
Hmm.
answer is. So you just have to kind of tier it um, to get, to know where you're taking your direction from. Oh,
Yeah.
excuse
No.
me, from.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, would you have a recommendation for people if they're starting a new project and obviously it's going to take a group of people to kind of move it forward? What would you say the right group size would be? Is there a good balance in there? Obviously, yeah, 25 is a lot. You're managing a lot of
Mm-hmm,
different
mm-hmm.
views and perspectives. Um, I live in a condo building. And I say it's like, when you get above 8 units, it's tricky because you get enough, then you're at people where like people can start developing their own
Right.
factions almost.
Right.
What's a good balance in there?
I think it really depends on the type of project. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that there is a number to really put to it. I will say that we have a process, our visioning process that we used when we're doing our design and getting to what the needs are on this project.
Mm-hmm.
And it can involve an entire community. It can involve a group of 50, but
Mm-hmm.
it's all in like the process that we use to hear their needs. We then take that information and evaluate it, kind of boil it down to
Sure.
what are the common denominators here.
Mm-hmm.
And yet then we report that back to the kind of the main, not main group, but the top group that's in charge of the project. But we've still gotten all that information from the users and the community members that are part of it, yet allowed them to be heard, but then we
Mm-hmm.
take it, we kind of evaluate it down into bullet points of what we hear and what we know we can move forward. So I think as far as establishing a number, I don't know that you can. I think it's just going to have to be your process, how you take all of the information that you're gathering and then what you do with it.
Okay. How do you bridge the gap between, you've got your committee and then you say you've got your like end users? Like what do you do to bridge that gap between the two kind of parties there?
Well, we do surveys. We take information. We provide, like, I'm speaking from a specific furniture standpoint. We've done what we call a furniture fair, where we bring in samples of all the products we want them to consider for the project, and we provide a survey for everyone to fill out. So you've got, on a school project, we would have students, parents, teachers, administrators, kind of a cross section of all of the people that have a stake in this. We get all of that information through our survey. We, again, boil it down to what are the common denominators, and then we present that to the steering committees that are creating, the final decisions. So that's a way to, we kind of do the in the community work, and then bring it back to the leadership of the project.
Oh, interesting process. Makes sense. Yeah, I think that's always the hard part is you've got entities over here that are going to be using it all day, and then you have people that have kind of visions, short term, long term for the space, and then kind of gaps in between, and kind of bridging that together.
Right.
So I want to shift gears for a second here and talk a little bit more about project specifics and trends. So speaking like focusing on the education side, higher ed, K through 12, what have you seen going on trend wise, maybe, over the last 2 to 3 years? We'll say like, hey, we've come out of COVID now. I noticed there were some trends kind of bubbling up pre-COVID, and now we had this kind of, slight disruption. Now we're maybe on the other side of that. What do you see going on now and going forward?
Well, definitely we are coming out of the whole COVID situation, and in regards to, our students and our education system was so deeply impacted by that whole event. Right now you're getting students that are coming back into the learning environment who, some of them have never been in a school. Some of them are afraid to be back out in public. And so the big trend now is to create the spaces that are not only creating a sense of community for these students, bringing them back together and all that stuff, but we need to provide flexibility for the instructors and the teachers in those spaces so that they can adapt their learning style or their teaching style to what they're faced with the students that they're teaching. Also, students, their social emotional well-being is so big and so high on the hierarchy of what we need to address in the spaces we're designing for them. Like I mentioned, you may have some students who are, not so comfortable being out in in public again,
Mhm.
and among large groups of people. And so you provide them with spaces where they can still be present, still see and communicate, and um, be involved in the, what's going on around them, but maybe it gives them some
Mhm.
separation. So we're still, while there, really aren't any COVID protocols anymore that we're
Sure.
designing for, we are dealing with and addressing what the students and the users of the space are coming out of COVID with, like
Yeah.
how do we help um, bring them back into life there.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And, that's kind of a common theme these days, especially mental health, well-being, students feeling a little overwhelmed, stress. And there's a lot of factors that I'm sure go into
Oh,
that.
it's not just COVID. It's, we
Yeah,
don't know what their environment that they're coming from is like.
sure.
They may be in communities that are very, disadvantaged or underserved, and
Mhm.
or, a home life that is less than ideal.
Yeah,
And they come to school and to their learning environments, and they need to feel safe. They need to
yeah,
feel, and they want to be seen and heard.
yeah,
And we need to create those environments, and also support our teachers and our
sure.
instructors by giving them the tools and the spaces to do that for
Yeah,
this. Those instructors and teachers are tasked with so much,
sure.
beyond just, teaching math and social studies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Can you give any like examples like from a architecture interior design kind of perspective on like what you're doing to try to help with that mental health kind of like stress of being maybe you guys said like yeah they may be back up, they may be at this school for the first time or something like that.
Mhm.
Can you give us some examples of like how you guys are trying to help address that or what you're doing with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it is furniture based.
Okay.
You've got, talking about stress and things like that, you got your sympathetic system, which
Yeah.
is, that's the system that determines the threat. And
Mhm.
that could be many different things to different people. So in our environment and in our furniture, um, that we provide in the space, and what that furniture is, we need to trigger that parasympathetic system so that
Mhm.
it responds to
Mhm.
whatever sensory input people are getting right now.
Mhm.
So, they need to be able to see or hear or feel
Mhm.
things. And you provide if you provide like soft seating, maybe seating that has a surround so they can go
Mhm.
and kind of be on their own, but yet still in the space with
Sure.
their fellow students. Um, we provide also the ability for more architecturally, like classrooms that open onto common spaces. So
Oh, okay.
you've got that ability to move around and change your location, which seems to be very popular. Break out smaller groups of students into more of a focused group in another area, but yet still within sight of the instructor. Um, Through, we've done a lot of designs with like garage doors that open and close
Mhm.
on these classrooms, and they all open out into these common spaces.
Hmm.
So there's lots of different ways you can kind of foster a collaboration and
Yeah.
community sense, but also provide the ability for students, if they need a break, they can break away a little bit. But obviously, you can't send a 5-year-old to a room by themselves. They need to be somewhere that the instructor can keep an eye on them, but they
Mhm.
feel like they can be in a, kind of bring their senses back down into a calm state.
Interesting. No, that's it. Yeah, that's kind of an interesting way to kind of tackle some of those issues. Yeah, especially talking about having a classroom that opens up onto the common
Hmm.
space.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So it sounds like you're kind of touching on. I don't know if you're familiar with like the points of biophilia. If you, it
I
sounds like
haven't
you're
really
kind of
done a lot with it, but it is very, yeah, it
yeah
does. We're bringing some of that in. Yeah.
yeah. It sounds like you're hitting on that kind of like hey, creating that refuge for
Mhm.
people to be able to kind of go place, feel comfortable, having that availability, the prospect can kind of oversee the environment
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Now you doing that like mostly in the K through 12 spaces, or are you approaching higher ed the same way?
So far, it is mostly in the K-12 area that we're providing, because I think while you do have um, some of these situations in both spaces, they're
Yep.
different in the higher ed, because those are
Yeah.
we're dealing with your young adults now,
Mhm.
and they are a little bit more autonomous and can
Mhm.
physically put themselves somewhere else should they need to. So being able to connect a larger group of people in different ways is more what we do, and what is prevalent in that K-12.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So when you're working on higher ed, are you working on, is it like large common spaces like the library spaces? Or are you working on classroom spaces? Is it both?
It's all, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean, we've done student centers, like a student union.
Yeah, sure.
We do, it seems like all the buildings on a campus um, provide a lot of the same spaces and resources for like they want to provide areas for students to go to collaborate, to meet up, to
Hmm.
study independently in a lot of different spaces, a lot of different facilities on campus. I mean, we do sports facilities, small arenas,
Hmm.
but yet they may have classroom spaces in them, because they do their you know like whatever sports physiology or something majors go to this building. So we want classroom spaces, but we also need breakout spaces, or they utilize some of that space for social reasons. Maybe you can rent
Hmm.
it out for an event or something like
Okay,
that.
yeah.
So yeah, I think I've done every single kind of space on a campus. It feels like sometimes, but you have an opportunity to create your lounge spaces, your gathering spaces,
Yeah,
your kind of a dining space
sure.
anywhere on campus. And I think that's definitely something that has evolved based on even when I was
Mhm.
in school. Like you go to the library to study, you go to the dining hall to eat, and now we've got resident, student housing that has a dining hall in the lower level,
Mm-hmm.
the ground floor. So they have lounges and study rooms and
Yeah.
um, tutoring centers and
Hmm.
counseling centers all in one building.
Oh,
So
wow, interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely involved to be very much more student focused in giving them the spaces that they're looking for more at their fingertips.
Interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting trend. Definitely different than when I went to school.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Although I have a
Lots of
warped
things are
sense of
different.
yeah, I have a warped sense of school. I feel like, early on you had to go to the library, but then after a couple of years, you just basically live in the art department.
Right. I was going to say that. I didn't know much more than the studio when I was in school.
Yeah, and it's always in a dingy basement
Yes, look
somewhere.
at that. Not fair.
Yeah, stick the art kids in the
Right.
basement.
That's because we're creative and we can envision ourselves somewhere else.
That's right, exactly. That's what I would tell myself at least.
Yeah, yeah, right. I got to the point when I was in school that I just couldn't stand to be in the basement anymore. And I bought myself a drafting table and had it at my apartment. So I could just
Oh,
do, unless I
nice.
had to be in the studio for class, I did all my work at my apartment.
Yeah,
So plus
that makes
I'm
sense.
too chatty. And so I felt like I needed to break or I was never going to get anything done. So
Yeah,
I had
understand
to
that.
kind of
Yeah.
self isolate.
So you're looking at all those trends. I guess what would you say what would you say has been maybe a one of your more favorite or interesting kind of projects you've worked on the last few years?
Oh, so we this one was a challenge, not a challenge, but a really great project because it spanned COVID. Started
Okay.
before COVID, but it was a school district in Columbus, Ohio,
Hmm.
Upper Arlington Schools. It's a suburb of Columbus. And we worked with Perkins and Will on basically a school replacement for 5 elementaries and a high school for the
Hmm.
district. It phased over, like the three of the elementary schools opened in 2020, the fall of 2020, and two more elementary schools and the high school opened in the fall of 2021. So that process, I really enjoyed that whole project because
Hmm.
while I only worked on the furniture portion of it. I don't know if you know this, but I only do furniture.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that has evolved over the years, over my years at Moody Nolan is because of lots of reasons, but I only focus on the furniture portion of our projects. So that's why I get to work on so many different kinds of projects, because they bring me in to help out with furniture. But anyway, so we kind of did what I was talking about earlier with this uprising. It was huge. I mean, we're talking about 5 elementary schools and a high school. And so we and the district really kind of drove this format, but we did that whole visualization of, we've got our committee up here who's kind of making the final decisions, but we have for each school, we need a kind of a steering committee who is basically a cross section of administrators, teachers of all kinds of teachers, of all subjects, students, parents, community members, Board of Education, this steering committee, but it's specific to that one school, because even within this one district, and you have 5 elementaries and a high school, the culture of each school is different. So we needed all those voices to be heard and all of their thoughts on how they envisioned the future of their schools to go. So we did these visioning exercises, lots of different ways. We give them precedent images, and we give them either Post-its or dots, and say, how do you feel about this? And what do you think works and what doesn't work? What are you hoping will happen? What are you afraid is going to happen? And we just took all that information, again, boiled it down and reported out. And then, you had maybe 2 schools that they wanted their classrooms set up one way, and another school wanted it set up this way, but the district overall said, no, we're going to be consistent across the board, because we need to be, we got to be able to, from a facility standpoint, utilize the same furniture. You can set it up in your own classroom the way you want, but we're going to provide everyone with the same product. So what was really interesting is that we came up with this final model that we've got a class of 28 students, but there is not 28 chairs and not 28 desks in this classroom. So you've got a variety of different seating options. You have a place to put 28 students, but they're not all the same. So it depends on how that, those students want to learn and how they learn best. Do they need to fidget more? Do they need to have some space next to them and not be right next to their friend? We provided flexible furniture for that very, use and reason.
Sounds very Montessori.
It is, yet it's a public school system, and they are bringing in some of that. And then all these classrooms open out into a collaborative learning commons. So, you could have 4 or 5 classrooms that open onto one collaborative area. And so you get that mixture and that community. And they called them neighborhoods. So it was really quite interesting to, to kind of bring all this language into the project and see how the district reacted and the students reacted and the teachers reacted. And so, by providing very flexible furniture, functional and flexible and durable, because durability is always the thing, because, schools don't replace their furniture for 3 decades. So it's, but I will say this district came into the project and said, we do not want a 1950s school. We want a, modern day, cutting edge. We're going to change, how we're doing things here. And I think they definitely got that. Now in the high school, we did some different things there. The building design is amazing. But with our furniture, we provided, again, that flexibility. We had 3 different classroom setup types where we gave them all the same pieces, all the different tables and chairs and things, but laid it out in different ways for them to then, and again, every teacher is going to do it differently or how it works for them. But giving them that ability to be flexible is so important in supporting how the teachers teach, because we don't need to, give them something that says you can't move this around, or is difficult to change, or that kind of stuff. So and and they, again, were kind of all these classroom studios that open out onto a common learning commons, and then this spine of the building that kind of connected all the academics, the music, the arts, the athletics parts of this school. And that is just a large common space, and it's got small little vignettes to lounge in. They use it for their dining commons. It's just got all kinds of different, it's very active zone and zones, lots of different zones. And then you have offices kind of interspersed throughout. Instead of like having a central office, where the principal sits, you have offices dispersed throughout the building. And even in the offices, very little furniture. I mean, it's a desk and a chair and some storage, but they don't want that staff is supposed to be out in the school, not sitting in their office. So, you kind of have to, help them along with that philosophy, but we also give them what they need to fulfill their jobs and perform.
Yeah, no, it does sound like a very exciting project. It definitely seems like kind of, that was one of the trends I was noticing with schools like leading up to COVID, and then COVID was kind of, it's like, I don't want to call it a disruptor, but this kind of like interruption of like, oh, we just got to like get through the moment, and now it's kind of coming back. But I think what's doing is it's showing or shining a greater light on the need of what people are kind of leaning towards. So like in one of our webinars, we talk about mental health and wellness, and like, what furniture can do to kind of help with the situation. It's not going to fix everything. Obviously it's only furniture, but
oh, come on, furniture and everything.
Yeah, right. Exactly. The guy selling the furniture will tell you it'll fix the world, I'm sure. But yeah, so we talk about, I kind of make this like half joke when I started doing it 7 years ago, like mental health and wellness was like not quite a joke, but it's like, why do we care about this? And it's like, wow, it's important.
Little did you know.
And so I think I've always said that I've always felt like the silver lining of COVID is like, realize like, this is like, not only is it important, it's probably more important than we even realized when we were going in. And it's interesting to see this school kind of make that shift. Like I said earlier, it seems kind of very Montessori-ish, where it's like you're giving that ability and that flexibility to let the students kind of engage, in their own way. And it seems to, I think, in those kind of models, like it helps students build the independence and gives teachers the kind of flexibility to teach to the student. But yeah, then that's a great way, like to have the interior and architecture kind of work with that kind of philosophy.
Well, and if students are engaged, they're going to learn so much more, instead of being talked at. Like there was something I read that said, you don't want the teacher's desk to be the biggest thing in the room, because that tells the students that the teacher holds all the power.
Yes.
And while you have to have, foster respect and cooperation and everything, you want the students to feel like they are an equal participant in this space. So, our teacher desks are now tiny and they move out of the way, they're so it's you give them their storage somewhere else. Another thing that's, in supporting teachers is giving them a space, not just the faculty lounge, but a collaborative, like touchdown space where they can go and talk with and plan with their other teachers, but also have a workspace outside of the classroom, which they a lot of times don't even own that classroom anymore. They move a lot throughout the building. So they need a space that they feel like they can put up pictures of their family and keep their purse and things like that. And also then get together with their other faculty members and kind of collaborate and talk about plans and things like that. So you just kind of creating those spaces in the schools is a whole new within the last, decade or so kind of concept.
Yeah. Interesting. So switching gears, so it's really interesting insights on K-12 and the classrooms in there. What would you say would be one of your more favorite higher ed projects that you've worked on?
Oh, wow. Now that I can talk. I mean, I can talk about a more recent one. Actually, I
Yeah.
think we have got some Agati product at it. Morgan State University. We did
Okay.
a student resident, student housing project. It's
Mm-hmm.
10 stories. We worked on it with HCM out of Baltimore.
Mm.
Great collaboration there. And again, I just did the furniture part. But what I really liked about this project was, this campus, this university is seeing
Mm-hmm.
tremendous growth.
Mm.
So they're needing to accommodate their students
Mm.
on campus more. And this, while it's 10 stories of a residence, it's also
Mm.
got the dining hall
Oh,
on the
wow.
first floor,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful dining space that looks out onto the campus.
Mm-hmm.
But they're also providing lounge spaces on each residential level, with either private study spaces on that
Yeah.
floor, or a kind of a community lounge. We've provided fitness
Mm-hmm.
lounges on every other floor, so students don't have to leave the building to go get their cardio in if they don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And the vistas looking out of these windows in the fitness lounges is amazing. You can see all the way across campus because it's high up, and
Yeah.
all windows. But then we also provided kind of student services spaces in the
Mm.
building. There's a whole center where they can go to be tutored,
Mm-hmm.
or meet with another student. And we within that space we've got a number of different ways they could meet.
Mm-hmm.
Some students want to sit side by side with their tutor. Some students want to be face to face, and we provided all those different opportunities within this one space,
Mm-hmm.
through furniture basically. And I think that's where we brought in your Nook the Hampton Nook. We've got
Oh,
the
okay. Yeah.
built in there, for that face to face opportunity. And then we've
Mm-hmm.
got some benching for side to side when they want to be working on a computer.
Sure.
It's I feel like it's like all the things in one.
Mm-hmm.
And we're actually expanding the building and building another tower for more residential spaces and more
Okay.
lounge and more student collaboration
Mm-hmm.
spaces, just because of the amount of the amazing growth that this university is seeing. So I have liked that one because, again, I like to see the output and how it gets
Yeah.
utilized. And just the process on that one was, we used a lot of student input. And so it was really great to, we set up a little furniture fair. We did
Okay.
mock-ups of resident rooms with 3
Oh,
different
wow.
manufacturers of furniture. So the students could come through and really see and
Yeah.
feel. And we did we provided samples of the lounge furniture. And what I loved watching was, the students come in and they kind of get themselves comfortable in their chair, in these different chairs, and see which ones they feel are going to
Mm-hmm.
work for them. And we, gave them an opportunity to respond to a survey,
Mm-hmm.
so that we could then take that information back to the university and say, this is what your students are saying. Obviously, we also had facilities
Mm-hmm.
staff
Yeah.
there to give their input on durability and
Mm-hmm.
how they felt about what we were showing. So we get a lot of voices in there, and then move forward with the design that way. And the final product has been, very well received. And I like that model of getting that interaction in the beginning, and then giving them basically what they've told us they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that sounds interesting. So you're seeing that more as a trend now with like the student housing, trying to keep like everything in one building?
I don't know if I would say it's a trend. I mean, on the universities where we've built that type of facility, we're seeing a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think again, it's dependent on the university.
Yeah.
If you have a limited amount of space on your
Mm-hmm.
campus, you kind of need
Mm-hmm.
to go up and
Yeah.
put what you can in that one building. But if it's a more established campus that has a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, facilities already, then you're either renovating what you have to
Mm-hmm.
provide a variety of different functions within that building, or you're building a new completely new facility on space that you already have. So I think it's really, really dependent on the
Yeah.
university.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess if you have a campus that's been there for a long time, you're probably going to have to take advantage of the spaces and facilities you already have. But yeah, I can see like as you're doing new stuff, kind of building into that like kind of new model or new ability to kind of take advantage of, the height and keep everything kind of centralized for people. Well, I just wanted to kind of start wrapping up here. I really appreciate the time today. There's a lot of really great insights. And it's really interesting. We don't do a ton of K through 12 stuff. So it was really interesting kind of hear about what you're working on, especially the projects in the Columbus, Ohio area. But as we're kind of closing up, I wanted to see if you had any like words of wisdom or insights that you wanted to leave with anybody today.
Well, I mean, before I do that, I want to say, as I was kind of thinking about projects, you say you don't do a lot in K through 12 or higher ed, but we've used your products a lot in those projects. So we have several projects of that type with Agati. So, I think it's definitely something that can cross over into, not just in, library furniture or aviation focused. It's the carols and the nooks and stuff are so and the pods. I mean, I love your pods. So
Thank you.
yeah, and we've used them on several of our higher ed projects. So students like having a study space that is just there sometimes. But yet again, maybe in a larger space. So that I think that works. But anyway, my words of wisdom. I mean, I will say we kind of touched on this a little bit ago when you had said your comment about how important it, what does it matter, furniture to mental health? Well, this is kind of a similar thing. I used to always say, when we get stressed or trying to meet a deadline or whatever, I'd always say, hey, we're not saving lives here. Let's just put things in perspective.
Yes.
But what I see now is that, well, yeah, it's true. We're not saving lives, but we are impacting lives, and we impact every life that walks into our spaces that we design. Every person who sits on our chair and is comfortable and can sit and do the work that they came there to do, we've impacted that. So my, I don't know if it's advice, but it's just kind of my philosophy is that everything we do has a impact down the road, and we just need to keep that in mind.
Yeah,
even
that's
though
true.
we're not saving lives.
May not be saving lives, but it all matters. It all matters. No, I think you're definitely right. I think, in some of our webinars, I talk about how it's like, you can create the refuge and the prospect for people and, give people the environment to be comfortable in. But if you don't balance it out with like having it simple as looking nice, like aesthetics plays a role in it. It shouldn't, our philosophy is it shouldn't carry everything, but you can't have a functional place that doesn't look good. It's
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that's I think that makes a lot of sense. It all does matter and does have an impact for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Jill, I really appreciate the time today. This is a very insightful conversation.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. It's been great.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on the podcast today.